Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Danielle Villegas, and I'm the acting president of the Society for Technical Communications Philadelphia Metro chapter. It's been a long day, so forgive me for tripping over my own tongue. I'm very excited for our kickoff webinar for the 2021-2022 program season. We're very lucky today to have Beth Anne Ashley, who will be presenting her webinar From Meh to Memorable, Create Impact for Your Virtual Presentations. We were originally going to do this back in May, but I guess everybody was still very busy, so Beth Anne was gracious enough to reschedule for tonight, and I'm really excited to have the turnout that we have tonight. Before we get started, I'd like to just address a couple things, just so you know. Oops, come on. There we go. The chapter does have some upcoming events. We have in October, we will have another webinar, which will be translating technical documentation. One of our other members is going to be presenting with his business partner about that topic. November, we're going to be having a virtual open house. This will be an opportunity for anyone who's interested in helping out or just getting to know us. To speak to panel members, including myself, and getting to know the chapter a little bit better. We don't have a date for that yet, but it will be before Thanksgiving, so we'll definitely let you know when that's happening. In December, we'll have a virtual holiday party. We had a lot of success with that last year, including, I think this year we're going to have our second annual ugly sweater contest, and we'll have some games and just kind of hang out. So that should be fun. In January, we are going to have another webinar that's going to be a presentation that was actually done at the STC Summit last year. It was really, really good, and I was able to ask the presenter to come back and talk to us. It's a great UX design webinar, and it's called The Design of Everyday Things. So I'm excited about that, and we just have to lock down the date in January. And we have a lot more other things coming up. We're going to be working with the Don DeBoard Scholarship and Student Membership Drive. We're still going to do Conduit 2022, most likely again virtual, and there's going to be a lot more coming up. So I wanted to just kind of get your radar in that we're going to be staying very active in the next year. And on that note, we wanted to say we need you. The STC-PMC is looking for volunteers to help rebuild our council. We've kind of gone through some changes in the last couple of years, if you're aware of it. Last year we did not hold elections because we couldn't get anybody to run. That's not good. We definitely need more people and more involvement. Your involvement can be as little or as much as you can donate of your time. We have positions that are available in programming, membership, and communications. It's very much a team-oriented thing. No one person is available or responsible for one thing. You work as a team and work collaboratively, and it's worked out so far, at least with our provisional committee that's keeping things going. So if you're interested in doing anything to try to help us out or get more involved, or you're interested in just gaining some leadership skills, leadership training is available. If you're interested in any of these things, please contact me at president@stcpmc.org, and I'll be happy to talk with you and see what we can do to try to get you more involved. And on that note, I'd like to turn this over to Beth Anne Ashley. Let me just make her the presenter here. And we'll go from there. So again, welcome, Beth Anne. And we appreciate you coming and kicking us off this year. So let me just kick you off there. And you should have control at this point. Take it away.
Do. Thank you. Thank you. And good evening, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well and having a wonderful evening. I am just going to take a moment to introduce myself, and my name is Beth Anne Ashley, and I have been a technical trainer and a software presenter for over 20 years. So I really spent most of my time in the world of pre-sales and solution engineering, and that meant lots of travel when people were on airplanes and they did a lot of face-to-face presentations. But then I also did the very first web presentation. And back in the day, my teammates and I would average roughly 150 demos a year. So if you do the math, I've demoed about over 3,000 presentations in my lifetime. So suffice it to say, I've learned a thing or two about speaking virtually. So in 2019, I founded my LLC, which is Demo Now Consulting. And now I teach people how to deliver better business and technical presentations. So I'm really excited to share with you my session today to take your presentation from something that's just meh to memorable and create impact in any type of virtual presentation that you participate in. All right, so I'm going to start with an activity, and if the slides have advanced properly, we're going to do a quick little activity to fill in the blank. I'd rather blank than give a presentation. So if you can find the chat panel in your GoToMeeting settings, let me go ahead and pull up the chat. I'd like to see what everybody thinks here. What would you rather do than give a presentation? They usually say that sometimes people fear death more than giving a presentation, so I'm interested to see what kinds of answers we get here. Oh, I love it. Scrub toilets. Get my teeth cleaned. That's funny, Jessica. I just did that today. And it is painful. I don't enjoy it at all. Awesome, awesome. Oh, clean your house, right? Just about anything. And we're just always so uncomfortable when we have to speak in front of people. So let's delve into some reasons why that might be and how we can fix that as well. Now, I'm going to go ahead and turn off my camera because I do think you can be strategic with it. I feel like there are times when you might want your camera on and times when you might want your camera off. So I don't feel the need to have it on all the time, especially as a former software presenter. So now our goal is to figure out, how do I create a lasting impact when your audience is virtual? So last year, we just fumbled through. You know, we had these Zoom calls and everybody was immediately switched to online meetings in a virtual setting, and really no one had a clue what they were doing. Now, I had the experience. So since the online world isn't going anywhere, and there are a lot of people that do enjoy having either training or presentations done virtually, it's something that we really want to think about. And one of the ways that we're actually going to work with that today is by practicing with some different tools that we have right here in GoToMeeting. Now, I know that you guys might be moving to Zoom. If any questions come up about Zoom, I'm more than happy to talk about that. I teach on Zoom all the time. But what you're going to see is that first and foremost, one of the things I'm going to do tonight is share a media clip. And that's going to include sound. So there is a checkbox here before you even share your screen or one specific application. You want to check this so that the sound from the video clips or music comes through clearer in your presentation. And Zoom has something very, very similar. Probably Teams does as well. I don't share a lot of video with that. But that's just something to be mindful of. The other thing that I really truly think lends a lot to presentations is drawing tools or annotation. So I'm going to give all of you the ability to draw. So you should see a message similar to what you just saw on screen. You should see something that says the presenter has turned on drawing tools for you. And you should see this little paintbrush. So if you remember the days when your parents told you don't go and draw on the ceiling or all over the walls, guess what? You're going to be able to do that tonight. So go ahead and see if you can find those drawing tools. Can everybody find them? You can choose the color you want for your pen or your highlighter or whatever it is that you're going to draw with. So let me see if you can find those tools. Hola, nice to see you. I really do think that if you want to add some fun, some animation, some appeal within your presentation, let people annotate. I love annotating. And one of the things I do currently is I'm still a contract trainer and I have to teach 3 days, 3 long days of online training. So these types of tools come in really, really handy. All right, so I'm going to leave the annotation turned on, and I will ask you to type into the chat and annotate from time to time. But for right now, I'm just going to erase all those drawings because I don't want to have them up on the screen. Oh, and another thing that I've noticed now, this is a difference between Zoom and GoToMeeting. When I have this little spotlight, I actually can't advance the slides. So that's a heads up. Annotation is fun, but then you want to go back to non-drawing mode when you're in GoToMeeting specifically because it doesn't let you annotate. So Zoom works a little bit differently. So what I've come up with is this methodology, my DemoIMPACT framework, as I call it, and I'm really trying to align business understanding with some technical capabilities. So you're going to get some tips and tricks here tonight. And my goal is to help you to sharpen your virtual delivery skills. So we're going to gain practical insights tonight so that you have a better idea of how to engage with a remote audience. I want you to feel like you can enhance your own personal strengths as a technical presenter. And I hope you walk away with a more confident mindset as a virtual speaker. So the letters IMPACT are just an acronym that you can remember right before you're delivering a virtual presentation. So we're going to talk about how you can incorporate your industry expertise into your presentation. Always use meaningful data. You need to be a practice presenter. I don't believe there's any such thing as a perfect presenter, but you can be a practice presenter. And you always need to have an action plan when you deliver a presentation. They always need to be customer-centric, and we'll also talk about how you can really come across as a trusted advisor. So let's start with industry expertise. You need to exude confidence all the time. Even if you're new to a role within your organization, you really need to act like that subject matter expert. So when you're giving a presentation, first of all, trust in your knowledge. There's usually a reason why you were asked to give a presentation in the first place. So you should have some of that knowledge, and you need to rely on that. So one of the things that you can do is reference industry-specific examples. So maybe you sat in on a really great webinar, or you attended a conference recently, or you saw an interesting LinkedIn article or a podcast. Talk about that. Reference that as an example within your presentation. If something was insightful, talk about it, share about it. Maybe you guys mentioned something that you learned at an STC conference. You share that with your colleagues. Anything that you can do to offer some intelligent commentary throughout your talk. Now, when I worked in corporate America and I was part of a department, we would have these team meetings. And every Monday morning, we had a meeting so that you wouldn't rush in and have to give a presentation. I really enjoyed that. I liked doing it at 10 o'clock, not at 8:30 when I walk in the door. So one of the things we always said was we had to offer a knowledge nugget as part of our morning meeting. And that was something that I really loved because it could be something that you learned in a training session. It could be something that we learned by talking to the product team, but you can give your audience a little gift, just like this delicious little Hershey's nugget here. We're coming into the Halloween season pretty soon, but you can give your audience a little present, and then that is going to be a wonderful way to build some trust and gain confidence from your attendees. So I'm not sure if everybody happens to know this or not, but let me go ahead and just switch over immediately into another tab here. I don't want you to see too much about what that has there, but here's a portal that I use when I do training. And let's just say, for argument's sake, that I'm about to go in here, I've signed in, and all of a sudden I close out. Does anybody know the trick to getting that back? Does anybody know the shortcut when you accidentally close out of a tab? You can come off mute or you can type it in chat. It's pretty simple, and I have to say, talk about a new world. My 8-year-old is the one that taught me this. Control-Shift-T. Let me try it again. Oh, I think you have to be clicked in here. So, yep. Control-Shift-T brings back a tab that you recently closed. Now that is not on a Mac, but I think that's a really great little helpful hint. And that is a perfect example of a nugget. All right, so I'm putting that into the chat for you guys. So you can use Control-Shift-T, just a little nugget that I learned, and my 8-year-old actually knew all the shortcuts. He would teach me how to use shortcuts to turn the camera on, turn it off, all of those interesting things. So that's a fun little one that you guys can tuck away there. Now, another thing that we want to talk about when we think about industry expertise is how you can be really driven towards your audience and serving that audience. So Bryn Tillman is a master of all things LinkedIn. And this is a great quote that I did get permission from her to use. And I'm going to come off camera here for a minute. You guys can too if you want. But she talks about in her session how you want to change from a resume to a resource. So what do you think that that means? Does anyone want to take a guess or chat or just come off of mute? When you hear those words, change from a resume to a resource, what does that make you think?
I think of me personally is that I always read in LinkedIn about how if you're looking for a job, that you should be trying to find somebody's pain point and try to show how you can resolve that pain point. And so that to me sounds that you are a resource to help with whatever that missing pain point is.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Any other ideas or thoughts? I know I'm asking a lot, but I do invite participation throughout all of our sessions here. So I want you to be able to type any thoughts or just talk. You don't have to come on camera, but this is a time when I would suggest in the presentation that you do come on camera if you're going to have more of a discussion. But I'll just give it another minute or two. Anybody else have an idea on that? All right, going once. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, don't be shy, people. We don't bite. I promise.
Yes, thank you to my brave volunteer. All right, well, we're going to go ahead and come back to that. And like I said, I'm just going to turn the camera back off now. It doesn't have to be on all the time. I like using it strategically. But one of the things that I like to think about with this quote is anytime you're doing a sales type presentation, it's always how wonderful my company is. You talk about, oh, you know, these are my 57 different accolades and awards that I've earned over the years. And they always start off with that. And they're really not focused on how you help people. What do you do that enables your clients to be successful? So Lynn's or Bryn's I work with Lynn and Bryn and I use their names interchangeably. Bryn's mantra is don't be that resume. Don't put your resume on LinkedIn. Talk about how you help people. So how do you tout your accomplishments without sounding cocky? So I always like to think of it as bragging without showing off. So you might say something in a presentation or in an interview. It would be something along the lines of, oh, you know, the best compliment I ever received was X, Y, and Z. And instead of saying, my company is so great because of this, try saying something along the lines or something similar to, our clients really love when, and spin it so that you're not touting so much your benefit, but the benefit that the client had. And that's really what I love about that quote. All right, so moving on to M. This one, especially in your industry, being technical communicators, this should be paramount. Not only do you need meaningful data, you want to have real life scenarios. And I honestly love the expression of walking a mile in their shoes. You know, understanding your audience and using an example that is going to resonate with them. Now, technically, the other thing I really like to think about with meaningful data is using an image. Just use an infographic, use a picture, anything else that you can to convey your message versus just straight text. Because using text is boring and you are going to lose audience attention very, very quickly. Like we said, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So if I was talking to a group of pre-sales engineers, I could share my travel experiences and tell them about the time when I went to Florida to do a presentation and I left my laptop at the airport in Philadelphia. And somehow I finagled my way through that presentation, but I would go into a little more detail, but I would definitely share something that is going to convey a message they can relate to. And this last one, I believe, is going to be the most important for you guys. You really want to proofread all content, especially new material. And I'm going to share a couple examples of things that really get under my skin in the next couple slides. So let's take a look here. I know the idea of putting Latin as a placeholder does what? If you know, put it into the chat. Why do we put lorem ipsum in there? Why do we use Latin as a placeholder when you see that in a mock-up or in, does anybody know from a developer standpoint? Any guesses? We don't speak Latin anymore, so why is it there? Yep, focus on the design. It doesn't give it any meaning. And the idea is that it is still being developed. I've always been told from software development, the purpose of the lorem ipsum means it's not ready yet. It conveys that this is not a fully fledged feature. So who knows what eyebrow text is? I find that pretty funny. Now, the best thing about this entire section is this call to action button. That I love. But everything else, don't use lorem ipsum if you can avoid it. Use something that's going to mean something to this audience that you're speaking to. All right, now you can draw right on the screen or you can come out and just tell me, but what is wrong with this agenda? Let me give you a minute to read it. Let's see how good all my proofreaders are out there. What's the matter with this? Not everyone knows about Jedis. I love it. All right, Esther, you are correct. What happened to number 3? Did we just decide that there's suddenly no number 3? So look at that. It goes 1, 2, and then straight to 4, 5. So that is an easily avoidable mistake. It is a very simple proofreading thing, but this really bothers me. This was a presentation that was given to thousands of people. This wasn't just for, a local group. This was a presentation given to a lot of people. And I find it interesting that they couldn't, proofread it and figure out that, hey, I need a slightly different number there. All right, so let's keep going. All right, let me go ahead and erase that as well. And I have to turn off the annotation. All right, so this concept of meaningful data really can also boil down to the old adage that if you can explain something at, even a 6-year-old level, then pretty much anyone can comprehend that concept. So this is as personal as it gets. This is a drawing that my son did when he was about 6 years old. And he had some kind of a career day session or something going on at school. He was so excited. And he came running in with this in his hands. And he came up to me and he said, Mom, I had to do this drawing at school and I drew this picture and I told everybody in my class, Mommy sells computers. And I thought, wow, he's so smart. That's wonderful, honey. What a great drawing. And I asked him, how come you didn't do a drawing for your father? And my son looked at me really quizzically, shrugged his shoulders and said, Mom, I have no idea what Daddy does. And that has always just warmed my heart because at the time, technically, I was a software solutions advisor for a disaster recovery and business continuity company. But, Mommy sells computers was pretty close. My husband, on the other hand, he was selling investigative services for fraudulent workers' comp claims. That's a little bit harder to explain to a 6-year-old. But it's a great way of saying, you know what? I know exactly what you are talking about. All right, get your animation pens out, because now we are going to talk a little bit about how we're going to practice as a presenter, and we are going to do a quick word find. So these are some of the phrases that you really want to make sure that you eliminate from your vocabulary. So these are taboo words that you will see in any presentation. So go ahead and get your pen and see if you can find some of these while we go through them. All right, we found so. And I think you can say to the effect, so now that we've covered this topic, let's move on to the other topic. But you don't want to do so, and then there's a huge pause. That is definitely in the category of a filler word, just like and and part of the way that you get rid of your so's and your ahs and your ums is simply by practicing out loud and honestly just taking a breath, taking a pause instead, giving your audience and yourself a little mental rest, and you can move on. Anyone in the software world, and maybe it's more because there's consulting involved, for some reason, kinda and sorta really show their ugly head. Oh yeah, can you do this in the software? Well, yeah, you kind of can go in and do X, Y, Z. And yeah, you just go in and you sorta change this around and then it'll turn into that. I mean, that is the most non-committal verbiage you can come up with, right? Right, which is the next one. And you can say right in conversation when you're talking with someone. But the kinda and sorta, to finish up with that, that's really so non-committal. You want to be strong in your delivery. You want to make sure that, especially if you are thought to be a thought expert or a thought leadership, and you are the expert and you're going to provide consulting for someone, you don't want to kind of be able to do that. You want to recommend. My recommendation is XYZ when you're working with this system. Or perhaps you're going to say something and you would say, you know what? Here's my thoughts on the matter. Here is what I would suggest. And you're going to give a suggestion. You're going to give a recommendation. You want that to be something that is very powerful. You don't want those, filler words in there. And the right is when it is overused at the end of a phrase. So this one here is, oh boy, did you see the team? They did terribly, right? And it really goes up at the end of the sentence. Do you know anyone who talks like that? They have a phrase and every other word is, I know, right? And it's really just one of those things. For me, it's worse than, nails on a chalkboard, but it definitely does not come across as professional. I think it's fine in normal conversation or to get a point across, but not in a presentation. And again, hopefully, not your best word out there. You don't want to hope, you recommend, I know that you're going to get something useful out of this presentation, not I hope. And then along those lines. Sometimes people stumble and then there's things along those lines. You know what, find a different way to say it. Oh, that and similar items. Or you can say something where you say, oh, I really love mystery stories and the like. Just get used to saying something that is a little bit less than along those lines. So nice job. Everybody found all the words. We can check those all off our list. Does anybody else have what I consider a crutch word or a filler word? Go ahead and say it or type it into the chat. Is there something that you say all the time that you'd really like to get rid of? Just. That's an interesting one. Yeah, just. I don't have it on the screen. I think I had it in a different version, but I had someone that said, never say sorry. Don't apologize. Even if something goes wrong, and you're saying if something goes wrong, let it roll. Let it slide. Move along. Like has unfortunately, ever since Valley Girl days, wormed its way into conversation. And I'll tell you what I did. I had to take a big piece of paper and write kinda and sorta. And I said again a lot. And again, and that was always a key, that I was nervous about something. And again, what we talked about, and I kept saying it. So I wrote it on a huge piece of paper and just X'd it out. All right, I'm going to erase these drawings so we can move on. You know, those are all those little phrases that creep up, but you can control them with practice. And we're going to talk about practice now. So no one's a perfect presenter. I mean, if you're giving a TED Talk in front of thousands of people, perhaps you're close to perfection, but we're talking about an online presentation. You want to be a practice presenter, not perfect. And honestly, you want to make it an experience, because if not, you should just send someone the slides. If you're presenting and all you're going to do is read the slides and you're not going to add anything else to that, then what makes listening to you different than just reading the PowerPoint? So what do you have to do? You have to invite interaction with your attendees. Set that expectation up front that it's not a one-sided lecture. I want you to come off mute and ask questions. I'm going to tell you to type in the chat. I want you to draw on the screen. I am inviting interactivity from the very start of the session. So bring people into the conversation. Say their names, go through and invite people to participate. That way, it's not just you talking at people, you're having a conversation. So I've spoken with Danielle. If I need to call on her, she's going to be my person that I'm going to call on, because I know she's going to help me out. I know that I've already spoken with her, so she will participate if I need somebody to. So you always want to have somebody in the audience that you know will be helpful.
I'm usually the victim in that respect with a lot of conferences, presentations. It's not my first rodeo.
Exactly. Rely on someone that you know. So involve them in the discussion. Now you have to rehearse multiple times out loud, but just on this last point, say people's names, include them in the discussion, use them for examples, ask their input. For some reason, we go online and we forget to do this because we're virtual, and maybe it's because we don't have the camera turned on, or maybe it's because we're just not in the same room making eye contact with that person, but you just need to recreate that same experience online. And you absolutely 100% have to practice out loud. You have to practice, and you have to practice with your tools. So I don't use GoToMeeting very often, so I set up a practice session with Danielle to make sure that there weren't any kinks and that I understood exactly how it was going to behave. Not that hard, didn't take that long. You want to be successful. And you might be thinking, okay, well, how long do experts really have to practice their craft? So here's a fun little group of numbers that I'm going to go through to give you an idea of how long it takes to actually practice all of this. So if you've ever seen the movie The Social Network, Rooney Mara is rumored to have done 99 takes to get that scene correct. I think that's fascinating. And if you're a professional athlete, you're in the court, you're on the field 5 to 6 hours of physical training a day. The author Anne Rice, if you're familiar with her work, 3,000 written words a day. So I know as technical communicators that will have a lot of meaning, but that is really what she has said she has done to perfect her craft. And if you play a musical instrument, I don't know if everyone is a musician in the audience, usually it's 2 to 4 hours a day practicing your instrument. And in his book, Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers, if you're familiar, they say after 10,000 hours of practice, you have mastered your field. All right, so when we talk about being a practice presenter, this is probably one of my most favorite slides in the deck. I love this image because your job as a virtual presenter is to bring the presentation to life. Literally, like the words are jumping off the page, just like you see here. A slide deck should really be your backdrop, not your crutch. And I love that. So think about those words jumping off the page. So here are some tips that you can leverage as you are going through and preparing for your presentation. And it really boils down to what you say, how you say it, and where You want your audience to focus. And by the way, you control all of those aspects. So what you say when you give your introduction, give your audience a worthy introduction. Less than 60 seconds. That's my goal. That is a Lynn Williams thing, the Bryn Williams counterpart, Lynn. Bryn Tillman, Lynn Williams, they sound so similar. And she has a career group and they practice doing their elevator speech. And in sales, or if you're just tight on time, it's great to have that worthy introduction in less than 60 seconds. So what do I mean by worthy? How are you going to add value to your audience? You know, what are you going to say to them? How do you make them want to be interested? Credential yourself. Make it so that you give someone a reason to listen. And you need to think about your word choice. So if you're in tech, only use acronyms if they're known to everyone. Don't use too many. And don't be too verbose when you're speaking. It's great for writing, but you don't want to be too verbose when you're speaking. Oh, okay, that's great. Lynn did a presentation. I know, she's awesome. Lynn and Bryn are awesome. And when we talk about word choice and we talk about what you're actually saying, you're always going to want to recap your previous section and lead into the next topic. Mine's pretty easy because it's IMPACT. I can always just respell it out. But you might have some notes on the side like I do. You want to look ahead and lead into the next topic before you advance that slide. Now, how you say it. You may have noticed that sometimes I'm changing my tone of voice, and not really high or low, but sometimes I have a lot more excitement, and sometimes I might be very serious. Now, when you're nervous, you will have a different pace. When you're nervous, you're going to be very, very fast, and you're going to go ahead and you're going to double talk, and you're going to really, really go too quickly. So really try to pause and keep a steady pace. Control your rate of speech. Enunciate your words, especially if you're being recorded or you're in a large room. And you can always pause for added emphasis on whatever you're saying. So you don't have to rush through your presentation. And you also want to be repetitive in a good way. And there's an old saying, tell the audience what you're going to tell them while you're telling them, and then go back and tell them again. And it's really the same type of thing. Because if you are not, and you're really having that monotone voice, we all know what that sounds like. When you've got that really monotone voice, all right, just like that poor teacher in Charlie Brown, we don't want to have that tone of voice, right? We want to make sure that it's interesting, it's exciting, you have a little vocal variety. And I really think this is one of the toughest things in the world to do. I have to say, the only benefit I really see to text messaging is that it's helped me to be more concise. Not by using strange acronyms, but learning how to say something with more brevity. You have to self-edit. I would say do your presentation out loud, time yourself. If you're really going overboard on certain sections, then edit yourself. That is one of the hardest things to do, but it will help you to be much more successful. Now, how about focus? The good thing about changing the focus is that with everything that we're discussing here today, you control the audience attention by turning on annotation, by asking them to put information into the chat. In Zoom, there's a participant panel, and you can use reactions. If you've been on there, you can give a green check mark if you agree. You can give a red X if you disagree. All of that comes into play to make it a much more successful presentation. There's also polls. You can use poll everywhere if you don't have Zoom. It really just depends on what you're trying to achieve. And of course, incorporating video. I definitely think it helps to come in and say hi, or maybe you play a video, anything to break up the slide deck. All right, and any type of distraction that you are going to have on your machine is a no-no. Turn off those pop-ups. Hide the menus. Use slideshow mode. Does everybody understand what that means? I always assume, but I think for internal meetings, perhaps you could, and let me switch over to it. If you switch to this and you've got all these slides over here and it's so busy, I don't know where to look right now. So Albara, when you're in slideshow mode, you can either go up here to slideshow, and by the way, you can record your presentation right from here. What a better way to practice than to record it just right within PowerPoint. You don't have to go into Zoom or another session, but it's playing from the beginning or from the current slide. And down here, I use Shift F5 all the time. Shift F5 would take you from the current slide, which this is not where I am, so I'd have to get back to it. But down here is how you go into slideshow mode. Otherwise, you know, always use subtitles. You could be reading this and it's completely going to distract you from what it is that I'm actually talking about. So I'm going to control the focus by having you exactly where I want you to be. Oh, there's all the Zoom stuff. So it's really just going into full screen presentation mode. So that is slideshow mode. So only if you're internal would I say that that is okay to do. I really think you should just always be in presentation mode like this. You can animate at a decent pace, but always have it in that mode. Now let's talk a little bit about using our camera. So if you want to come off camera, please feel free to do so, or put your camera back on. That is completely fine, because I'm going to talk a little bit about using your camera. So if I am going to use my camera, you have to talk into the camera. Now, even though I want to turn towards Danielle, because she's over there and I want to look at her, do you see what I'm doing? Now you're looking at the side of my face and my microphone. So that's why I don't love it if I'm presenting a lot of technology. And nobody wants to just see your forehead and nobody wants to look up your nose. So make sure that you are properly placed in front of the camera. Otherwise, I say don't use it or use it sparingly. But you need to be talking directly into the camera because that's how it looks like I'm making eye contact. As soon as I look up, down, or left or right, it's not as effective. And here are some really excellent reasons for why you shouldn't use video. So let's take a look at this. If you're wondering, should I use video? Well, if I can see the contents of your kitchen cabinet, then no, you should not use video. If I know what you had for breakfast that morning, no, you should not use video. So at least do the Zoom background once you get Zoom. I know we can't do a background here, but there are backgrounds for a reason because all of this is completely distracting to me. I have no idea where I'm supposed to focus. And by the way, if you don't know how to control your camera and you're going to turn yourself into a potato, and you're going to stay that way through a meeting and you cannot turn yourself back, which happened, or your husband's going to run behind you in his underwear, then don't use video. You need to make sure that you are in control. And with that, I'm going to turn off my video for just a moment. So lots of fun things, but this was something that happened and it really got very, very popular on the web last year. Yeah, this is why I use a background. Absolutely. And the blur background or any kind of background is so nice to have in Zoom. All right, so we've really talked a lot about practicing, using presentation tools and skills to the best of your ability. Now, throughout the entire presentation, you really need to have an action plan. So what do we mean by that? You want to be strategic in your delivery. I like to think of a motto as every click counts. Don't just click through slides because they're there. If you plan not to use slides, just hide them. I hate when people speed slide, you know, like tapping on that arrow through the end. Why are they there in the first place if you haven't timed it appropriately? That's another thing too. If you're going to talk for 45 minutes, let's take a guess here. How much content do you think you actually need for a 45-minute presentation? Now, this is something everyone should be able to type into the chat. Just take a guess. If you're going to speak for 45 minutes, how much content do you think you need? But guess in minutes. Or slides, 12 slides. Okay, someone else. Well, how much do you think? All right. They say on average, you can trim it down about, yes, I was going to say half as much to about 3/4. So if I was going to talk for 45 minutes, I could be fine with 30 minutes worth, but I could trim it down a little bit less. So if you have 2/3 the amount of time, and especially if you're going to incorporate questions and discussion and anything other that you want to have some more interaction, that is all you're going to need. So it's really, truly not as much as you think. So be strategic. Not only does everything you show really need to have a purpose, but what are we talking about today? Make it memorable. What are you going to present so that it's memorable for your audience? One of the ways that you can add some interest within your presentation is to compare and contrast. Do a before and after. Maybe you've done a project at your organization and you show the pain that the organization went through beforehand. And then after, you show how you solved that problem. That's a great example. Use before and after, and always, always 100% finish with a call to action. And if it's sales, hey, where do we go from here? What's your procurement process look like? Maybe it's just a meeting. What are the next steps? Your call to action could be, I really need everybody to fill out their form by September 30th. Great. If that's your call to action, then guess what? Your last slide is not going to be any questions, because what's the answer to any questions? Any questions? You know what that answer is. No. A big fat no. No one has questions at the end. They're ready to leave. Exactly. Crickets, Danielle. Crickets. Silence. So you don't end with, is there any questions? You should be taking questions throughout. You should invite interactivity. Your last slide should be that call to action. Please fill out your forms by September 30th. If you have any questions, here's my information. And you leave it at that. If they have questions and you're finished, guess what? They're going to ask. But you always need to have a call to action. Make sure that you're really almost laying out a blueprint of how you want that presentation to go. So this is a quick example. We had our garage redone, and as you can see, it looks pretty clean on the left, but it's kind of a dingy floor. And I said kind of, it is. It is definitely, most definitely a dingy floor, and there's not a nice clean line between where the driveway ends and goes into the garage. And then afterwards, look at the transformation. There's so many house remodel shows. You know, we have a lovely speckled garage. It's nice and clean. And this was actually because my husband got an interesting, cool, classic car that takes up the entire garage, but it was definitely well worth it. So compare and contrast. Really highlight something that is going to be of interest. All right, so before we do go forward, I do want to see, is there anyone with a question about any of the topics that we have discussed so far? You can either come off mute or you can go ahead and type a question into the chat. I haven't seen too many questions, but I always want to give a break to let people ask anything you're thinking about. All right, so if we don't have any questions, how do you encourage introverts to participate? All right, that's a great one, Danielle. So I think if someone's more introverted, first of all, I think typing in chat is going to be easier than typing in chat is definitely going to be easier than having somebody come on the phone and speak, you know, come onto the line and speak. And I'm going to show you another way that we can encourage people to participate. So you can draw on the screen. One of the things that I have seen done in training is you ask everybody to check a box to be able to put an X in whatever quadrant they fall into. And you might want to just go into maybe a common Google Doc. I do it in my training classes. If we have a training and I want to brainstorm and we're virtual, you can write on whiteboards. There are tools for that, but I like to just give somebody a Google Doc at the end. So I would encourage more written participation, but I would also really preface ahead of time, you know, I really don't want to be the only one speaking in this meeting. So I'd really love for everyone to participate. And maybe you do put your pegs in the audience and you say, you know, Joe, you've got a lot of great ideas. I know you were president in the past, or you've worked on this project in the past. Do you think you could share some of those ideas during the meeting so you can put a plant in the audience to really help that? And it could even be where you call upon a manager and have that manager call upon the subordinate. Do you know what I mean? If there's some other type of relationship there, rather than you as the presenter asking, you can also encourage somebody else to ask their constituents. Anyone else have ideas? I mean, that's what I have off the fly, off the top of my head. So I think that's definitely helpful if you can write it down and somebody is more introverted, they don't want to speak as much. All right, well, we talked about our action plan. Now remember, I'm using the word customer centric because I really am talking a lot about my past and working in pre-sales, but your customer is your audience. You want to focus on solving a business problem. Absolutely, totally. Of course, technical communicators are going to be more introverted. But if you are solving a business problem, if you are fixing something that is broken within your industry, your organization, you're providing some type of a solution. That should really be your focus. So if you're not comfortable speaking about something, you know, really think back to, you know, the reason why I'm talking here is because I'm fixing something. You guys came to me with a problem and I found that solution, and focus on it that way. And that also, by the way, ties back to that theme of be a resource, not a resume. So even if you are more introverted, focus on how you're going to help someone. How can you be helpful to your audience? Be nice, be kind to that audience. So we want to solve a business problem, and you want to think about the language, the terminology. You guys are excellent communicators with the written word. So how can you articulate something from the client's point of view? And I was working with a woman who kept going on and on about how busy she was. And she always talked about being this HR department of one. You know, Beth Anne, I'm an HR department of one, and I just don't have time to do X, Y, and Z. So unfortunately, when I listened to her give her presentation, she had to talk to, you know, 200 different people about this new HR system they were rolling out. She used HR examples because that's what she knew. But unfortunately, none of her HR examples made any sense to the audience. So she was talking about putting in an HRSM, or I don't even know the right acronym, some kind of HR certification. And I told her afterward, you know, use something more general. You're talking to IT people. If you don't know it, just say PMP, Project Management Certified. Everybody knows that. So try to use a more universal example that is going to really personalize the topic for the audience. Because I hate to break it to you guys, but it's not about you. It's about your audience. So think about it. Your audience is sitting there saying, why should I listen to you? What are you going to give to me that is going to give me my 30 minutes worth of information? And everybody has something different in their agenda. What do you think is the most important thing to each person in the meeting? How could you even appeal to everyone in the audience? Now that is very tricky. That's super tricky. But when I would do a presentation and show the software, I really had to think about all of the personas. You know, I had to think about the end user, the administrator, the executive, the process owner, and I loved to talk to all of those different personas in the presentation. So that's something that can be helpful as well. Now, when you're speaking to your audience, you want to go into that role of being a trusted advisor. So how can you build trust, build credibility when you're virtual? Well, you need to tell a story. You need to show that you're a human. So if you can share an anecdote like I've done with the audience, they're going to appreciate your authenticity. So whether it's a case study, it's a customer story, it could be a testimonial. I like to call them customonials. because it doesn't have to be a long story. It can just be a sentence or two, but work that into your conversation, and that can help to find that connection, a common point of interest. And that's something that you want to do when you're genuine. If you're yourself, if you're genuine, then people will connect with you. Now, I also have this mantra of, my goal is to help you present your best self. I want you to let your best self shine. So you have to be authentic. Now, my husband hates that phrase. He thinks it's very Kim Kardashian, like living my best life, being my best self. But what I mean by your best self is before you give a presentation, think about the person that won an award, got an accolade, got a promotion, got 100% on their exam, whatever it happens to be. Not the person that ran late to the meeting and spilled coffee all over your shirt. Think about your best self. That's who you want to tap into when you're presenting. And everybody is different. So what do you think would be your style? Go ahead and get your drawing tool out, get a pen, and maybe you want to draw a little star or put a check mark. What are you most comfortable with? Are you a checklist person? Do you like quotes? Are you a storyteller? Are you a numbers person? Do you like to have a chart? What do you like? Go ahead and draw all over. Yeah, I mean, stories are really going to be essential, even if you're not as comfortable with them. But any of these different tools are going to add interest and be a lot more interesting than just words on the page. You can see this chart has nothing on it. It says category 1, 2, 3 and some measurements, but it's interesting, right? It's visually appealing. And don't forget that when you have a quote, you're going to add your own spin by reading the quote. So here's our friend, Ben Franklin. And his quote is let me start over. His quote is, tell me and I forget. Teach me and I remember. Involve me and I learn. So it's really a perfect quote for this presentation. And that's something that you can read and you can add your intonation and your own voice and your own spin on your session. So think about how could you incorporate each of these different items into your next presentation? Whether it's a number, a percentage, telling a story, all of those are going to add a little bit more flair and a little bit more interest. Now, back to the question of what if I'm not really very comfortable and I'm more introverted? Well, we've said picture tells 1,000 words. So if you're not the super chatty type, you can just let an intriguing picture act as a conversation starter. So this could be nothing more than a picture on your desktop that pretty much invites somebody to say, wait, is there really a Beth Anne Drive? And I would say, yes, there is. And my story would be actually in the 1980s, my mom was in real estate. And like all people in real estate, she bought an investment property and it's in Harleysville. And she was able to name the road because she was one of the primary owners. And she named that street Beth Anne Drive. And I've always wanted to steal the sign, but that wasn't really my thing, so I never did. But what's funny about it is that I really was, on my birth certificate christened Elizabeth Ann with an E. And at that point in time, I didn't like the E. Now, this is a more recent picture because I was in Harleysville doing a demo and I had to find it, but I didn't like the E back then, so I changed it. But that's a true thing. There's nothing more than a picture. Maybe you have a great favorite destination. This is San Diego. I met my husband there. I've gone to a ton of different conferences in San Diego. I love the food. I love the beach. I could talk for hours about San Diego. So it could just be a picture. Could be Hawaii. Could be anywhere. The lake. Something that you enjoy. And guess what? It's always safe to talk about children, pets, hobbies. This is actually from a long time ago, but these are my kids. They usually work their way into my presentation at least once or twice. There's Aiden, who drew the picture when he was 6. That's Liam. And that is my dog, Wolfie, who is going to turn 17 tomorrow on Friday. I have no idea how he's still with us, but he's a Beagle Hound and he's going to be 17. It's amazing. He's my first fur baby. And here's that wacky husband of mine. He is the only person that I would let convince me that it would be enjoyable to swim underwater with sharks around. So we went on a very exotic honeymoon. We went to Fiji, and there I am scuba diving. So it could just be as simple as a picture. If you're really not very comfortable talking about yourself, talk about yourself in the third person, talk about a topic, just use a picture to be a conversation starter. And to wrap things up, what I want to do is just go over what I consider my top tips to help you create impact virtually. So as we talked about with that letter I, you want to demonstrate your business acumen. Show that you are a subject matter expert. You want to use audience-specific examples that are going to draw them into the presentation and really make them feel like they're a part of it. You have to rehearse out loud multiple times. I equate this to singing in the shower. You might sound great when you're singing in the shower, but you might not sound quite as great when you are not. So you have to practice out loud. And you have to encourage interaction. I know sometimes it feels like you're drawing straws, you're really pulling, needles out of a haystack, but the more you do it, the more you're going to get that interaction. And if I can do 3 days of online training and have people say, wow, that was really interactive, it's definitely possible. And when you guys do move to Zoom, make sure you practice. There's so many things that you can do with online tools. Just practice, make them comfortable so they're second nature. And always, always follow some type of an action plan. So even if you get lost in your slides, you can get back, have a little cheat sheet next to you, make sure you end with that call to action. And most importantly, be genuine, be yourself, be authentic. If you're not funny, don't try to be funny. If you hate numbers, don't use them. I threw a couple in. I don't love them, but if it was an interesting fact or figure, I would if it made sense. And if you've gotten to this part of the presentation and you still are not convinced that an image is going to convey a message better than text, then all I have to say is this. So I'm going to give you a minute. If you know what I'm saying here, type it into the chat, or else go ahead and come off mute and let me know what I've said. I guess because I have kids, I have to speak emoji. I'll give you a hint. This first one is not prayers. It's giving what? When you put your hands together like that, you're giving. Thanks. Yes. So take it from there. Let's see who can come up with what I'm saying. All right, no one wants to be brave enough to take a guess. That's fine. I'm going to get you started. Oh, there you go. Thanks for listening to me present about speaking online. Any questions, email me. Now, of course, I look, where are the eyes looking? Unfortunately, that emoji you can't change. So unfortunately, it's going the wrong way. But what would I normally look? Not backwards. I look forward to, and that's just a date. That's just the emoji. But speaking, yeah, I look forward to speaking or working with you again soon. All right, so maybe that's a teen thing. I'm in that world, unfortunately, now. So, but you get an idea of how you can really communicate with just emojis, with just pictures. People don't even usually use too many text icons anymore. It's all pictures. So at this point, I really want to just thank everyone for your time and your attention here today. If you need any other information about how to create impact in your virtual presentations, my contact information is there. I'd love to reach out and talk to you guys again. And like I said, my mission is really to help you present your best self. So at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Danielle and see if anybody has any questions or if there's anything you want to talk about.
I was going to say is if instead of saying, "Do we have any questions?" I was going to say, what are some things that people learned tonight that they would like to share that they're going to probably bring back to work or within their own presentations? I think for me, I usually find some of these things because I trip over my own words because I have so much to say sometimes. But when you were talking about what kind of tools do you use to try to grab attention, I find that for me it was validating, to see, yes, it's okay to use humor. Okay, it's okay to do this or that or the other thing. So that was the one of the takeaways I had.
Nice.
I try to throw in a lot of humor where I can. Albara, yes, I can send you a copy of the presentation. I'm sure we can do that. That's why we also recorded the presentation so people can listen to it again as well. Any other commentary? Observations?
Yeah, this is Jessica. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you, Jess.
Okay, cool. I have a new computer, so I'm not sure how everything's working these days. But I love the slide about how 99 takes to a film scene, 5 to 6 hours of physical training a day. Like, you forget that. I was doing a presentation last week. It was a recording. It was the first time I just had to record a presentation, and it took forever. And reading this, I'm like, yeah, it should take a while. So that's a little validation that you need to practice.
Absolutely. And there was a maybe an ATD, which is the Association of Training and Development. There was an article about how long does it take to record, a half-hour online training. And it's hours. I mean, it really depends on if you're using like Captiva, Articulate, things like that. But just to speak properly and not flub, it really is difficult. And I had to do, it only was about a half hour, maybe 45 minutes, and I could not get over how many times I had to start up again. And thankfully, we have video software now where you can just stop and then cut that part out. But it takes a ton of time. It's not something that, you go over in school even. Sometimes you're asked to do a presentation, but it's not a skill that we enforce a lot. So it's good that you enjoyed that.
That can even be with a script. I know when I would do some instructional design, I would write up a script and I would still flub it up and still flub it up. And then I'd get the perfect take. And I live right near a railroad, the Northeast Corridor. So suddenly the train would go by. I'm like, no. So, there's things like that, so that can happen too. Even if you have the best laid plans and you've practiced, you have a script in front of you in case you lose your place, or you can just read off of it, you can still flub it up.
Mm-hmm.
And Albara, I'm just using PowerPoint. Number one, because I'm most comfortable with it. My kids use Google Slides. If I had to collaborate with someone, I would use Google Slides because that lends itself nicely to collaboration. But I find that most of the software clients, if they have technical presenters, their sales team is using a corporate structure down to, the color scheme and the branding. So I feel like a lot of people use PowerPoint in their intro, and those are the people that need to become a little more comfortable with speaking. Most of the tech presenters are doing a very good job. They just have to remember to, zoom in if you need to. If you can't see something, use your fingers, zoom in. Don't be afraid to touch your screen or draw on your screen. So this is just PowerPoint, and I'm comfortable with that. But I know Canva is great. I'll probably try to work on that when I don't have as much detail. I'd love to dive into that, but I haven't personally used it, but I love seeing it.
Another good one is just using, if you have a Mac, just using the, what's it called, Keynote. I've used that sometimes, or sometimes I'll flip back and forth between PowerPoint and Keynote to get the features that I want or the font I want or something like that. But there's times I've traveled overseas to do a presentation and I don't want to bring my whole laptop. I'll just bring my iPad. And I'll work off between my iPad and my phone, because my phone will give me the script, but the presentation itself or the slides would actually come off of Keynote. So there's lots of different tools, and we're talking even when I did that oh, I want to say even a dozen years ago or 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So that capability has been around for a long time.
Yeah, there's a lot of different tools, and you want to use what's comfortable for you. I would say, as long as the slides are interesting, they're fine. I don't want to say don't use slides because so many corporations have them, but you've got to, again, not have them as your total crutch, just your backdrop. You need to bring them to life.
Right. There's one presenter in the STC some people are familiar with, and Bernard Ashwandon, who will have a lot of slides because there's a lot of information, and he'll say, okay, you can download the information, but you won't be able to keep up with all the notes and the information I'm giving to you. So he puts numbers at the bottom of his slides and says, you can download the slides and just take notes of what slide caught your attention. So that way you can go back and review it later if something kind of strikes your fancy, which is an interesting approach. It definitely makes you listen, but it also allows you to relax to be able to really take in the information too. So there's lots of ways to approach it. But I always found that kind of a fascinating approach. I don't know that I could pull that off, but he definitely can if you've ever listened to him. Does anyone else have any questions or comments or things they're not sure about that they'd like some more clarification? No? Okay. Well, on that note, Beth Anne, we really appreciate what you've done tonight. I think this is probably one of the best September presentations we've had in a very long time.
Yay!
So I think it
That's
definitely
great.
kicked off our program here on a very high note. I think everybody's taken something really good away from this. And again, we want to thank you for your time and your patience, especially since we rescheduled this, many months after we originally had. So we appreciate you coming back, and hopefully we can have you back another time, sometime in the near future. And on that note, again, everybody, thank you for coming, and we appreciate you participating in our chapter events. We hope you come to some more. And if you have any questions, please contact me at president@stcpmc.org, and we'll get you involved. So again, thank you and good night.
All right. Thank you.
Good night.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Danielle. Take care.
Bye-bye.